What you're looking at right now is an archetype triangle. It's used mainly by the platform fighting communities to describe character archetypes, though I've never really seen it outside of these genres. The only other time I've seen it is my time being in the Rivals of Aether workshop. The goal of this, in the specific context of the extended workshop, is to hopefully try and gear character design so that it's not aimless and that it sort of slots together and it fits in perfectly. While it's a great tool, I think, for helping guide directions and help people probably ask questions and look at specific examples for characters, I argue that there's some aspects about it that could probably be changed or streamlined perhaps to better showcase what sort of fighting game archetypes are possible. To more clearly understand my argument, let's quickly go over how fighting game archetypes are defined. Typically, an archetype is created based on a shared toolkit of many characters from other games. In other words, characters with similar tools and playstyles fall into an archetype. For example, rushdowns have quick buttons and fast movement speed, while zoners are slow with large projectiles. What separates an archetype from a playstyle, though, is that these tools are usually exclusive to said archetype. Grapplers are typically the ones with command grabs, while zoners are usually the ones with the biggest projectiles. Playstyles, meanwhile, are simply ways of playing that are not bound to their archetype. The biggest example, and the whole reason I made this tiradical video, is this right here. Bait and punish is not an archetype. To give some further evidence, allow me to illustrate some other commonly agreed upon archetypes. For example, zoners. Zoners are usually slower than average and like controlling their opponent's space with either big normals or projectiles. They lack good close-up game and appreciate distance. The footage I have playing is Vatista from the game Under Night in Birth Clear, whose full-screen beams, bouncing projectile, and anti-air flash kicks make her a good hyper-extreme of zoners. She doesn't like being up close, and has great ways to cover all approaches. Rushdowns are fast, with usually low HP, but great pressure once up close. They struggle the most with zoners, and yet are their greatest foil once in close range. Typically having high-low mix-ups, a command grab of some sort, and fast buttons for counter-hitting, they lead to great offensive gameplay. The example I want to show off is Chip from the Guilty Gear series. Chip is fast, has great high-low and command grab mix-ups, but suffers from a low HP, high defense, and low guts, meaning that he takes an exorbitant amount of damage off of a failed read. Grapplers are usually big, slow, heavy fellas, with access to at least one command grab, but usually have access to two. Their slow movement speed but high potential damage output makes them scary at close ranges. Zangief and Hugo are both equally terrifying grapplers, with not only a common anti-zoning tool to prevent people from turtling them, but also high damaging command grabs that cover both scared blocks and fervent jumps. Lastly are Shotos. These are all-arounder type characters, typically having a fireball, DP, and Tatsu, or some move that moves them forward. They're so prevalent that they have their own sub-archetypes as well. Ryu and Ken are classic examples of Shotos. They have both great abilities close and long range, but not as strong as a rushdown or zoner. Now, in dealing with bait and punish, as well as spacing, footsies, and mix-up archetypes, allow me to provide an argument as to why some of them are not archetypes. For starters, every archetype I just mentioned can bait and punish. Zoners can bait bad approaches and punish with projectiles. Grapplers can bait bad wake-ups and punish with a high damaging command grab. Rushdowns can punish bad button presses with faster buttons, and Shotos can punish almost all of these in some way with their toolkit. Playing bait and punish is more akin to playing a chess opening. Two players can play the exact same character but have different abilities in the bait and punish game. Footsies as well are not exactly an archetype. Footsies are rather a fundamental aspect of fighting games. So important to fighting games that there have been other games, and yes, even books, published about good footsies. Mix-up and spacing are the only ones that are ambiguous. Despite being able to be put in the category of a game plan, characters exist that are not only built around mix-ups but also good spacing. Almost all characters can benefit from bait and punishing, as well as footsies, however, to some varying degree that I can argue that it's not correct that they are an archetype. Archetypes have clearly definable traits that are unique to that archetype. In addition, it's also possible for that archetype to blend in with other archetypes. In reality, bait and punishing cannot be described as an archetype because of how non-specific of a gameplay mechanic it is, even in Rivals of Aether. Every character can footsies to some degree, every character can space to some degree, and every character can bait and punish to some degree. Which leads me to this, hopefully spurred on by this argument. Archetypes are important for both design and aesthetics and design and gameplay, but I feel as if a triad of zoner, rushdown, and bait and punish isn't an entirely correct solution. Characters that seem to have bait and punishing built into them are more easily defined as zoner characters or mix-up heavy rushdown characters. The reason saying the triad doesn't need to include the grappler by saying it simply baits and punishes is, I hope to have proven, a bad argument. If bait and punish was viewed as a legitimate archetype, then every archetype would be a bait and punish, and their differences would be how far into rushdown or zoning they go. I don't intend for this to be some sort of end-all be-all, well I have a solution type of video. In fact, I don't really have one. As I was debating and thinking over what would be the best replacement for bait and punish be, the harder I drew a blank, because grapplers as an archetype are not as strong nor as represented in Rivals and other platform fighters compared to other video games. While I can't offer what I hoped would have been a nice conclusory answer that could have been to simply replace it with a new archetype that I've discovered while browsing Shoryuken forums, that unfortunately cannot happen. There are, however, some things I want for you to take away from this video if my argument got a bit too muddled. First is that bait and punish is not an archetype. Some characters can be designed around baiting and punishing, but to some degree they're classified better as other characters. Baiting and punishing is a part of the game plan, not an archetype. Second, there are some really well-designed and great characters in the Rivals Workshop. I toyed around with some of them as I was making this video, to hopefully find a better concrete argument in rebuttal if that should be needed. A lot of them are surprisingly well-designed, even from looking outside of a platform fighting perspective and looking more grander in the terms of fighting games. If you want to get into perhaps looking at some of these characters and maintain a somewhat low power ceiling outside of cheapies, go with what's allowed in the weekly collection, and maybe perhaps meander around for some other nuggets of unknown gold that are lying away from the eyes of the public. I could give you a new idea to make your own character, or perhaps a deeper appreciation for fighting game characters and their designs. If this video manages a somewhat positive reception, I may make another video going into details about specific Rival Workshop characters I like and talking about their designs, but that remains up in the air. This is Danbo. I love you, and I hope you have a great day.